Okay, now I'm seeing some of my familiar faces, but we actually have more call-in people tonight. It's interesting, who are calling from the phone. But anyway, it's 6:31, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm so excited tonight to be joined by I don't need to pin myself, Charlie. Caroline is the star of the show tonight. Very excited. We were introduced a few months back by Logan Duvall from Sowing Prosperity. I've been on his podcast a number of times, and we both kind of come from this from a very personal journey. So Caroline's story is so interesting, and I think her products are the other kind of missing piece of the puzzle. And as we've talked a little bit about in the promotion of this two-part series we're doing with Beam, is that the microbes and the minerals work together. And so I'd just like to introduce Caroline Allen, one of the founders of Beam Minerals, and let her start by telling her story of how she came to the understanding of how important these specific minerals are and what a difference they can really make to your health. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Martha. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with one of the other smartest women on the planet that I know. So truly a pleasure. I am a mineral geek. So I came by it naturally because minerals changed my life. About, I guess it's actually going on 15 years ago now. I was coming out of a corporate career in the technology world, not in the health and wellness world. And I was in very ill health. I'd had 2 children, several miscarriages, and had just struggled with depletion issues since I had my children. I had flatlined adrenals, which they were flatlined for over a year. And I'd worked with many different practitioners trying to change those. I've had autoimmune, grew up with an autoimmune condition, and also had a really intense mold exposure event in my life, which greatly affected me. I had recurring sinus infections every 4 to 6 weeks, actually. At that time, had really bad inflammation in my gut. I've had intense gluten intolerance all my life. And even though I was gluten-free for 7 years or so, I could never get over the chronic inflammation with, bloating and elimination issues. I struggled really badly with sleep. And at that point, I was just barely moving into menopause, or probably I was in later stages of perimenopause. But I was really struggling with sleep. I would wake up 4 to 5 times a night. So really struggling. And at that time, I met a friend who introduced me to plant-based humic and fulvic minerals. And he had these liquid minerals. He's my business partner now. And he handed me this little glass of liquid. He said, maybe these minerals will help you. And I took it, and they tasted like water. So it was very easy. And I started taking them every day, and I changed absolutely nothing else. I didn't change my diet. I didn't change anything. I just took these minerals every day. And after about 2 months, I went to my dentist to have my teeth cleaned. Oh, that was the other thing. I had really bad gingivitis and deep pockets, inflammation in my gums. I had bone loss in my teeth, and I'd worked with 3 different dentists trying to heal all of the problems in my mouth. And she looked in my mouth. I had my teeth cleaned. There was no pain, no bleeding. And suddenly she was like, what's changed? The pH is completely different. The tissues no longer are red and inflamed. They look pink and healthy. And, because it was just a small cup of liquid every day, I didn't even know what had changed. But I thought about it. I said, maybe it's these minerals. 4 months in, I went to my naturopath and I had done my regular adrenal test, a saliva test. And she looked down at the results and again was also surprised. She said, and they had been literally flatlined for over a year. And she had, at my last appointment, she had given me a prescription, a naturopath giving me prescription for hydrocortisone. So it was really dire. And I had never filled the prescription. And she said, they're 1/3 of the way up the chart. This is amazing. The hydrocortisone's really working? I said, I never took that stuff. And she's like, well, what are you doing? And I said, I think it might be these minerals. So over the space of 8 or 9 months, literally every one of the symptoms that I described to you, the sinus infections, the gut problems, the bloating, the elimination issues, which was a constipation for me, the sleep issues, the mouth problems, they all just resolved. Now, if it had just been 1 or 2 things, I might have, just said, okay, whatever. But it was so many things that resolved. And I started to feel like myself again. I started to feel like a human being and have energy for life. And I kept going back to this friend and going, this is crazy that I feel so good. And what is going on? And he started feeding me little pieces of information that started the breadcrumb trail. And I ended up just going down the rabbit hole. And in the process, I studied, I started out studying, just minerals and why did minerals make a difference? So I learned about how minerals operate in the body. And then I learned about how minerals are replenished in the body, how they actually get to where they need to get to in the body. And then I learned all about things like plant decomposition and what humic and fulvic are and where they come from and why they work so well with cellular systems. And in the process, I had so many, I just had aha moment after aha moment after aha moment. And I could not, at that point, I just went to him and I said, we need to bring this information to the world. I think of people all day, every day that just need minerals, and nobody is talking about it. So, and then I said, he had a very small company selling essential oils and these minerals kind of on the side. I said, forget the essential oils, it's the minerals. So that was really the inception of Beam Minerals. We've had several different brand names, but the real mission that I'm on is trying to bring the information about how minerals work in the body and how they're replenished and how humic and fulvic are so effective at that. In simple language with metaphors and stories and things that people can really understand. Thank you, Martha.
I love that. And, I later really got into minerals, going to, I went through Morley Robbins, if you're familiar with,
yes.
I think we've talked about Morley before. So,
absolutely.
He's very focused on minerals, but I think, one of the really kind of critical pieces of the puzzle is how different these minerals are to, so many people are taking minerals today that are, basically rocks. And they're not very bioavailable. And I've talked a number of times with the group. One of my favorite books is called The Life Bridge. And it's this tiny little book about how microbes turn inorganic matter into living matter. And they use the minerals to make all of these enzymes and things that deliver the goods to us, basically. And I'd love for you to explain a bit about how they're different and how the humic and fulvic work differently, because I think there are a lot of people who are taking high doses of these salt-based electrolytes. And the more I've gotten into looking at these salt-based electrolytes related to Parkinson's, the more problematic I think it is. So I'd love it if you would talk a little bit about
yeah. Yeah. You know, where I want to start a little bit is to provide a little conceptual framework, because I think it really helps. And you know, when I first started studying about minerals, first I actually wanted to learn every mineral and what it does in the body and how it does it, you know, and I started down this rabbit hole of trying to learn, you know, how much of each mineral my body needed and why these plant-based minerals were working so well. And quickly I recognized that the complexity of, you know, your body, depending on who you talk to, you need 17 to 22 minerals in your body every single day in varying amounts. And there are these macro minerals, which are the salt of these salt-based electrolytes are macro minerals. They're the ones that your body uses a lot of. But there are also many, many other minerals that lots of people have never heard of, like molybdenum or manganese, you know, things that or boron. I mean, lots of people wouldn't even think, I have no idea what that is. Do I need it? You know, but you absolutely have to have it in small amounts. So there are what we call the micronutrients as well. And all of these minerals work together. Every single mineral works in a balanced way with 1 to 10 or more other minerals in a natural balance. And why is that? Because your body is an ecosystem. Your gut works a lot like a forest. If you think about a forest with trees that are growing and plants and they're dying and they're decomposing, and those microbes are now turning their mineral content into active, you know, what we call effectors. Humic and fulvic are like effectors. They bring nutrients and minerals, these foundational fuel, into the cells to deliver the nutrients to the mitochondria. And they also detoxify cells and whole cellular ecosystems. So there's this conceptual framework of changing from a mechanized perspective of the body that we're supposed to use recommended daily allowances of minerals, things that were this model that was designed in a lab, doesn't really relate to each one of the individuals on this call who have very specific lifestyles and eating styles and health histories and genetics and epigenetics, etc. And each one of us is unique and requires different sets of minerals in different balances, because that's the way our body works in our life. So you cannot solve a complex algorithm like that using something like recommended daily allowances. But the beautiful thing is that Mother Nature, in her incredible wisdom, has been solving ecosystem issues like this since the beginning of time. And Mother Nature created humic and fulvic as the nutrient uptake and detoxification tools for all cellular systems on Earth. Where they actually come from is from any decomposing freshwater plant. And that's one of the key things to recognize. They do not come from the decomposition of saltwater plants, like algae, seaweed and those kinds of things. Okay, they come from freshwater plants. If you see a pond and the water is brown, that's because there's actually decomposing plants. And in the decomposition process, microbes go through a very specific process and result in these humic and fulvic substances. And Martha, I want to check with you because I don't know your audience, and I want to make sure, am I going too deep or am I at the right level? Please let me know if.
I think you're at the right level. We have kind of a broad spectrum. Sometimes when we have more people calling in, it's a wider spectrum. Our real typical audience is a pretty sophisticated audience. A lot of them have scientific backgrounds, or they've been really involved in self-education and health and all of this for quite some time. So it's a pretty sophisticated audience generally.
That's great. So in our products, our beam minerals, the humic and fulvic in our products comes from something called humate. And I want to describe where it comes from, like how it was created. So this is 65 million years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And the earth was actually very warm in lots of places, covered with rainforests, huge freshwater plants. And a meteor hit the Yucatan and it killed 75% of all life on Earth in a few hours. Cataclysmic event. I was just reading about it today. I think that just the crater of that event was 12 miles deep. So you can imagine the kind of cataclysmic event that created on Earth. And all of these rainforests around the Earth died and decomposed. Now, there are humic substances in places like the Himalayas, and it's called shilajit, and it oozes from rocks. There is peat, and peat is in the United Kingdom, and it's like a clumpy soil-like substance. There's terra preta in the Amazon basin, and here in North America, we have some materials called humate and leonardite. These are black, crystalline, incredibly rich material. They have the energy of entire rainforests into a small strata of soil that's about 10 to 12 feet below the surface. The nice thing is that means it's very, very pure. It's had no contact with modern pollutants.
It's an interesting, just a question for me, because my husband, John, his family was from Ireland. And I was always looking at sort of what would have been in his.
Martha, I can't hear you.
You got muted.
Oh, there you went.
It actually muted me for some reason. Did you hear he was from Ireland? Or so my husband was, yes. His family was originally from Ireland. So I was always kind of trying to figure out what sort of ancestral things would be important to him. And the area that they're from is very much bog land. It's that peat bog. So I'm wondering if the waters in that area then would have been naturally high in these kind of minerals just because the water runs through the bog.
Absolutely. And in fact, the ancient people there, they used the peat for healing purposes. They would wrap wounds in it, all sorts of different things. So absolutely, yes. So, and same with terra preta in the Amazon basin. It's well known as a healing, something they use for healing. The ancient peoples use that, indigenous people. So inside of this humate material, there are these two molecules. And I specifically call them molecules because they are, we also call them mineral complexes. So, and they both carry the full spectrum of minerals that your body needs, beautifully formulated by nature in the proper ratios of minerals that you need. So there's lots of magnesium and potassium and calcium and these macro minerals that you use a lot of, but there are also all of the other micronutrients that you need in those proper ratios that you need them. And it makes sense when you think of the way nature works, that nature wouldn't leave this, where in nature do we have concentrations of minerals? We take pills, we take a calcium pill, but where in nature does calcium get delivered anywhere in that form? It doesn't. In fact, I like to use the metaphor of the forest. Like if you have a beautiful, healthy forest and you take a wheelbarrow of calcium or magnesium or potassium and you dump it on the forest floor, those.
Oh, now you went mute.
Yeah, I went. The plants in that area do not thrive because it's a concentration. Ecosystems like small incremental changes over time. That's how cellular ecosystems thrive. So that's one of the fundamental things to understand. These humic and fulvic are ecosystem tools, which is why they're naturally already formulated in the ratios that your body needs, because they were designed in an ecosystem model. Now let's talk about the other capacities that they have. So fulvic it's a golden molecule, which is why the liquid, actually this has a little fulvic in it. It's just leftover from my morning. And the liquid is golden. The molecule is very, very small. It's much smaller than a cell. The beautiful thing about it is because it's smaller than a cell, it does not require digestion. It absorbs through any tissue that it touches, which is why we have it in a spray, because you can spray it on, you can breathe it in, you can let it go in your eyes, and it automatically absorbs directly through any tissue that it touches, bringing the mineral content that it's carrying directly into those cells where the mitochondria have access to it for energy generation. So with the spray, if you have a cramp, that could be menstrual cramps, or it could be leg cramps, or it could be a tension headache or sore muscle from working out, you just spray it on. So fulvic does an amazing thing. It's an incredibly effective flavonoid, and a flavonoid is an intercellular transporter. It carries 60 times its weight of nutrients into the cell. What's really cool is your body recognizes fulvic as a beneficial substance. So any channel that opens in your cell wall, the fulvic goes straight through. And it carries this bolus of nutrients and minerals that are associated with the molecule, and then it changes its polarity. It's the only molecule on Earth that does this, the only molecule. And when it changes its polarity, it's like a magnet. If you could turn a magnet off and there was things attached to it, they would just fall off. So when it changes its polarity, these things drop off inside the cell. It's literally a delivery system. But then it's in this opposite polarity. It travels around in the cell now, and it picks up viral detritus. It picks up bio-waste and toxins, glyphosate, nanoplastics, things that are ready to exit the cell. And now the opening happens in the cell wall, and the fulvic carries it out of the cell. And then it changes its polarity again. Now it's in the bloodstream, and it drops that bio-waste, toxins, et cetera, in the bloodstream. Now the humic molecule comes into play. And humic and fulvic are like these synergistic partners. They work together. And when you understand this, you're gonna be like, this is crazy. That's what happened for me. So the humic molecule is much larger than the cell. I like to describe it like a Velcro ball. It's very, very sticky on the outside, and it's got a huge amount of surface area. It travels through the bloodstream, picking up all of that bio-waste, toxins, heavy metals, senescent, or people call them zombie cells, nanoplastics. It adsorbs glyphosate, so it's incredibly effective at removing glyphosate from your system, but also deactivating it, making it no longer able to create its problems in your system. It gathers spike proteins, graphene oxide, all sorts of system detritus. And then at a certain point, this molecule that has all these things clinging to it gets so heavy that it falls out of solution. So that's like if I had mixed some powder into my glass here, and if I set it on my counter, at a certain point, those things would precipitate out and they fall to the...
Oh, you got muted.
And that's what happens in your body. This molecule gets so heavy, it falls out of solution. Now, what's cool about it is it leaves your body through every elimination channel. Now, if you're involved with protocols for detox, you have probably thought about needing to have certain detox pathways open, but in nature, detox just had to happen. So it uses every single detoxification channel in your body, including your sweat, your tears, your earwax, your snot, your saliva, your breath, everything. Of course, your urine and feces. So, sometimes people start using humic and they're like, wow, my sweat stinks, or my tears itch, odd things like that. So these two molecules, I call humic Mother Nature's janitor, because it just hangs out in your bloodstream, picking up the detritus and carrying it out on a continual basis. Now, if you're doing a protocol for detox, at the end of that protocol, you're then again encountering environmental toxins. So you need to have something in your system that's constantly removing the trash. And that's what humic does. But you also need to get that toxic load that's in your cells out. And that's what the fulvic does. So these two work together synergistically.
I love it. I love the description of how it goes in the cell and does all these things, but I also think about it in the context of the microbes, because they need these minerals to do their job. And if they're not getting what they need, they start to take it from us.
Thank you.
I think that is really underappreciated in the problems we have in our microbiome. If we have a nutrient poor diet, which, the Western diet, frankly, is very mineral depleted because of the way we're growing our food, because so much of it's processed, all of this, that, our microbiome can steal nutrients from us when there's not enough for everyone. And so this is another way, I think, to sort of combat that problem and provide the nutrients not only that we need for our tissues, but also that the microbes need to make all the things that they make for us. Because, they're frankly a big factory for the vitamins and neurotransmitters and things that we need. And they need the minerals in order to do that.
Yeah. And it's, I say minerals don't heal anything. But mineral deficiency and depletion, it is the health issue of our age. And, I talk to people all the time, and I talk to lots of practitioners who say one of the big things that is happening is people are coming to them. They no longer have one issue. They come with 3 or 5 chronic symptoms that are really affecting their health. And the practitioner starts and goes, okay, which should I start with? And what they came to us and they said, we start with the minerals, because the first thing we need to do is support the entire energy generation of the system, because most people's bodies are operating like cities in a brownout. So when your body your body's made of 37 to 150 trillion cells. And inside of your cells, you don't just have one mitochondria, you've got thousands in your brain. In a single neuron, you could have upwards of 2 million mitochondria. So no wonder when you're mineral deficient, you have brain fog, because your brain cannot generate enough, the mitochondria in your brain cannot generate enough energy to do all the functions that you need. So it picks and chooses. Your body says, well, I'm going to keep the lights on even if they're dimmed way down. So the fundamental, and of course I am a mineral geek, and absolutely we know that gut health is central to health, but underneath gut health is minerals. And the thing about minerals, and I want people to really get this, everything in the universe, every structural element in the entire universe is minerals. If you took all of the water out of your body, you'd be a little pile of minerals with maybe a few amino acids mixed in. It's that fundamental. And minerals drive every single biosynthesis process in the body. Every single biosynthesis process and energy generation process in the body requires minerals, and not just 1 or 2 or 3 salt-based electrolytes, but a full spectrum of minerals. So it's like the foundation, if we're talking about Parkinson's, or we're talking about autoimmune, or we're talking about And I mean, any health issue, if you can start with minerals, the body has more possibility of being, of coming back into that natural balance.
I love that. One of the other things that I've heard you talk about that I, really resonated with me too, is that the gut is a freshwater system. Okay,
Yes.
our blood is a saltwater system, but the gut is a freshwater system. And so many of the products that are on the market today are saltwater system based electrolyte mixes. And so maybe you could just talk a little bit about the freshwater versus saltwater, which made so much sense to me.
And let's talk a little bit about salt. Okay, so they say the top amount, like the highest amount of salt that's healthy for an adult human is 2,300 milligrams a day. Now, I'm going to tell you that many people, especially people who are eating processed foods, and they're getting well above 2,300 milligrams of food if they're eating chips and all the things that people eat. Even lots of sweets have tons of salt in it. Okay, so first of all, we just have to talk about that. Now, you take a salt-based electrolyte that has 1,000 milligrams of salt in it. Now, the thing we have to recognize is that when you eat food, and maybe that food has a lot of salt in it, but it also has lots of other things. So even though you're getting a fair amount of salt when you're eating some potato chips or something, you're also getting carbohydrates, you're getting all sorts of different elements in there as well. But when you take a bolus of 1,000 milligrams of magnesium citrate that's salt-based, you're getting a huge amount, a concentration of salt in your gut. Now, again, using the forest metaphor, what I actually ask people to do is, if they're using salt-based electrolytes, take them and mix them up in a glass and feed them to their least favorite house plant for 3 or 4 days, and you'll see what happens. And then when you recognize that your own gut, your own microflora are freshwater life, they do not thrive in a salt. If just drink a glass of salt water, you'll feel queasy. And that's because your body says, ooh, this is too much. We're going to have to get rid of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you do this and the other thing is, salt-based electrolytes were designed for soldiers and athletes who were experiencing critical depletion during high performance moments. They were not meant to be used daily by someone doing the keto diet, okay, or a low carb diet. They're not meant to be used daily. And when you use them daily, what happens is the lining of the bladder and the kidney become irritated. And now you urinate more, and you actually end up flushing more minerals out of your body. And I talk to athletes constantly about this. We're working with a trainer in Switzerland, actually, who works with Olympic athletes, had a huge impact with his people who have been using these salt-based electrolytes to feel depleted, they feel dehydrated, and they still have cramping, and they stop doing that, and they start using these humic and fulvic substances. So they're no longer, their microbiomes start to come into balance, their bladder, their whole urinary tract system comes back into homeostasis, and now they're actually hydrating rather than irrigating. Rather than just getting water that goes straight through them, their body is also getting the water's uptaking into their cells, and that's hydration. So it's this. I'm on a mission to help people understand about salt-based electrolytes. I actually don't recommend using any mineral alone. And, this is where I understand Morley Robinson's. It's true that we do need a lot of magnesium, but the problem is, if you use magnesium, a lot of women are using it for sleep or for elimination issues, because it will make you go, because your body says, I've got too much, I need to get rid of it. But if you do this on a regular basis, you see magnesium has a synergistic relationship, a balanced relationship with phosphorus and calcium. And so if you put into your body, let's say you're taking a magnesium pill every night for sleep, What your body says is, I've got a concentration of magnesium and I need to find phosphorus and calcium to balance this magnesium. And where does it get that? From your bones and your teeth. So not a good thing to do, especially for women who are in perimenopause and menopause, because bone health is so important. I've worked with trainers of athletes who came to me and said, our athletes who've used these high dose magnesium, potassium supplements over the years for long periods of time, they're experiencing osteopenia and osteoporosis. So this is the potential. I mean, of course, they've used huge amounts over a long periods of time, but I'm just trying to warn people, minerals don't work alone. They're not, your ecosystem doesn't know how to manage that, and you will play whack-a-mole. You'll solve this problem and another one will pop up over here.
So one of the things that we're actually working on in our hypothesis related to Parkinson's is potassium dumping. Actually, a battle going on in the gut between gram-negative bacteria that produce urease that attack the good bacteria in order to get the potassium, that spills potassium, causing this electrolyte, I mean, basically a short circuit.
Yes.
And I mean, it's very interesting to me too, because, you know, my husband was an endurance athlete. He ran marathons for a long time. And there are a lot of things that, you know, in the endurance athletic world that they're doing that are not long-term healthy. One of them is the salt-based electrolytes. The other is a lot of the, you know, carbohydrate loading that they do, and the, you know, the ups and downs of the electrolyte swings and the stress on the body. And also that opens up the gut lining. There's research showing that the gut lining gets opened up after those endurance athletic events. And part of that may be the salt-based electrolytes, frankly, but, and they get endotoxin crossing over into the blood and all this inflammation after an event or a big training type thing. And, you know, I look back at some of that and wonder, you know, if you set these cascades in place a long time ago, you know, how long does it take to rebalance the system? But it sounds like, you know, I mean, you started to see results in a, you know, it didn't take forever for you to really start to see.
Relatively short period of time. I mean, I think, you know, again, I just keep going back to the conceptual framework, because I really want people to begin to recognize their body as a cellular ecosystem. And whether you're a high performance athlete, you know, a woman in menopause, you know, young person in college trying to study, I mean, or, you know, a young kid, you know, everyone, if you try to solve ecosystem problems with strong biohacking kind of things, you're going to stress the body. You're not going to support it. You know, even, and I think the idea, the conceptual idea of, you know, sports, because it's also, you know, ecosystems don't love intense stress like that over long periods of time. So it would only be natural that there would be intense effects as well. Now, the interesting thing is working with these trainers, we're finding ways using large amounts of the humic and fulvic to support. And this is the cool thing. So because humic and fulvic are already in the natural formulation of minerals that your body utilizes, if you have a high performance moment, you can add a lot, because it doesn't create that imbalanced concentration. You see, it's putting it in those ecosystem
ratios.
Ratios. So we work with, one of the great stories is a guy who's a tennis pro, and he's 60, I think. So not young, not in the young quadrant, but he's like the third in the US. So he's quite, you know, he's good. And he's doing a a big thing in like Kentucky in August, a big tournament. He's the only guy coming off the court without cramping, like heat stroke. And all his guys are looking at like, what the heck? Like, what's with you? And he's like, bean minerals, plant-based minerals, forget that salt-based crap, So it really can change things. And with the Parkinson's, I'm very excited about the protocol. We've had, just anecdotal feedback from people with Parkinson's that they have definitely had a decrease in the shaking.
Well, I think, there's definitely evidence in a lot of the research, but also just in going through, my own work, looking at blood work of dysregulation of iron and copper. And also in using the hair tests, those are all in ratios. They're looking in ratios, but they don't look at kind of the whole picture. They just look at the pairs. And one of the things that I have actually been learning between sodium and potassium, which are a pair that they look at, but they have very different effects on something called the glycocalyx, which is that lining of our gut, the lining of our blood vessels. And so potassium actually makes the sulfated polymer endothelial surface layer stretch way out, and the sodium has a very different action, and the molecules are very different in their behavior. So I think just looking at sort of some of those mechanisms in Parkinson's with the different elements, I feel like something like this could have a pretty significant impact on people with Parkinson's to kind of restore their nutrient balance, because I think there's also some evidence that they are suffering from high calorie malnutrition, which really goes back to minerals deficiency. I mean, malnutrition is minerals deficiency ultimately.
Yes. I always go back to that show Alone. If you've ever watched the show Alone, and these people go out into the wilderness, and they have to survive for 100 days with nothing. And almost always they either go home because they can't stand being alone, or they go home because of mineral imbalance or mineral deficiency. That's it. Those are the two reasons. I mean, every once in a while somebody gets giardia or something, but what they really talk about as the show goes on is, oh, they're getting this mineral and that mineral and so much from a piece of fish or something, So it's that fundamental fuel. I think you were talking about the glycocalyx, and I think that there's an interesting, piece about the salt-based electrolytes, and because the glycocalyx is so important for so many functions in the body, and the way that the whole salination or salination of the system affects the glycocalyx.
Well, you're getting this, you're getting this collapse. You get a collapse and a stretching out, and a collapse and a stretching out. And, what you really want is a consistent barrier that maintains its intelligence. And when you're getting these, big salt-based electrolyte swings, you are really messing with this very delicate layer. And, I think most people had never really heard of it until a few years ago, but it's really coming to prominence of understanding how important it is for protecting us and deciding what gets in and what stays out. And so, And
COVID, because COVID attacks the glycocalyx, I think it's one of the reasons. So these are so great, such great things. So, the bottom line, and really everything that we're talking about keeps pointing back to recognizing that your body is an ecosystem. And the amazing thing is, I think the thing that one of my biggest aha moments was recognizing that the incredible wisdom of the body. The body is a homeostasis, balance, building machine. It's incredible at it, and it's constantly doing it. So if you can give it this foundational fuel and these foundational elements that are required, it's amazing at coming back to health and wellness.
Fixing stuff. It's like I equate a lot of times when I'm talking about when you're trying to feel better, is it's kind of like a farm that's sort of been worn out with chemicals and overuse and all these different things that you've done. And, you've done that over a period of time. Don't expect in one day to solve the problem. But if you start to put the right resources back in place and, in soil, that's organic matter. Well, I mean, this is organic matter. It's basically organic matter from the plants. And, that's probably your foundational piece. And then, the microbes that work with it to do the factory. And I like I've gone back a few times looking at where they came up with the term vitamin. Well, vitamin is vital minerals.
Mm-hmm.
And the microbiome makes a lot of vitamins.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So I'd like to open it
conversation.
up for questions if you're
That's
good
great.
to take questions. So if you've got a question, if you want to raise your hand. We usually have quite a few people who are big at asking questions, but
And the one other thing I want to mention is, one of the main reasons that we have so much, and I'll say this really quick and then we'll go to Carrie's question. One of the big reasons we have so much mineral deficiency, and it's been on such an intense rise, has to do, one, with the fact that our foods are mineral deficient, and I'm sure you've talked about that many times.
Yeah.
It's also because of glyphosate exposure, which chelates minerals out of your body. And it's also because we're drinking, a lot of us, bottled and filtered water, which is devoid of minerals. And the thing that I want to mention to people is that's affecting children the most. When I was a kid, we drank out of the hose. We drank water that was mineralized. Now kids and the rise of chronic issues in children is on just this kind of trajectory. And if we can get minerals into children, it's going to be one of the biggest helps that we can do. So, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that's a great reminder too, because I do talk about the problems with our water quality. I mean, our public water systems are not great, but if you are using a reverse osmosis water filter, you've got to put minerals back into your water. But let's get to the question. So we've got Carrie Shaw. You want to unmute yourself and ask your question. Hey, Carrie.
Hi, hey, Martha. Hi, Caroline. I have a question. So you said it's a flavonoid.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference between that and like a nootropic? Because it sounds like it's going to where it's needed and not depositing or taking if it's not needed. So what would be?
What I call a flavonoid is just an intercellular transporter. And there are lots of things. There's flavonoids molecules in blueberries and all sorts of different foods. The difference between this flavonoid and those flavonoids is that the fulvic molecule changes that polarity and drops its bolus of nutrients into the cell.
And then it's also able to pull out because of the change in the charge?
Exactly. So now it's in an opposite charge. It goes around the cell, gathering those biowaste toxins, et cetera, and carries those out of the cell.
Okay. And because of the charge, it's not going to deposit too much or take too little, vice versa, per se?
So it generally has, so this is one of the things that's being studied around the earth with humic and fulvic. The interesting thing about them is that they have this capacity, it seems, to understand the mineral balance of the system and deposit what's needed and take what's not. So like, let's say you have too much iron. I won't use iron. Iron is another thing we should talk separately about. But let's say you have too much copper in the cell. And actually, in case you don't know about how things work at a cellular level. So inside your body is all water. And the way things move around in aqueous systems, which are water-based systems, is via something called diffusion. So, and diffusion works on something called the concentration gradient. So if you drop some salt into this glass of water, and I come back an hour later, the salt will be gone and it will be distributed equally through this aqueous solution via that concentration gradient. It's the same thing that happens in your cells. So when the channel opens, if you've got more salt outside of your cell than inside, it will carry the salt out. Okay. Now, but so that's the natural way, and they call that passive diffusion. Just this, there's too much salt out here, or there's more salt out here. Let's bring, just back and forth. Okay. But the fulvic molecule does something called active diffusion. And that active diffusion is actually delivering and removing in some sort of, we call them effectors. So they have the effect of balancing the system.
Okay.
Now, how that actually, like literally when you start studying it, you get into quantum mechanics, and it goes extremely deep, much farther than I mean, at a certain point I hit a place and I talked to these scientists who are they're the quintessential, a Russian guy actually, who's been studying this for like 40 years, or actually probably 60 years now. And he just said, at a certain point, no one knows how it does it. It just
works.
They recognize that it does it.
I can accept that.
They don't even know how it can change its polarity. It's literally the only molecule on Earth that can do it.
Okay, and then I have a two-parter. Thank you for that explanation. So when you were talking about the mineral depleted water that we're all drinking, is there a water that, if you put in your beam, for example, in the reverse osmosis, would that be enough for the electrolyte beam, the electrolyzed ones? Would that mineralize it enough, or would we still need to add in? And then the second part of that is like, if you're drinking alkaline water or alkaline water, are we still wanting to add back in some of your electrolytes from beam? Yeah. Or electrolyze?
So first of all, let's just start with a reverse osmosis or what is that? Other waters that are filtered and have no minerals. I always say the best thing that you can add back into your minerals is our electrolyzed product, and that's the fulvic. And the reason I say the fulvic is the best is because it absolutely will not change your water taste at all, and it provides that full spectrum of minerals. And it's immediately bioavailable. It starts absorbing through your tissues in your mouth, your throat, your esophagus. By the time it hits your stomach, your body's already utilizing. So what other great tool would you want, is from my perspective. Now, I also do put our MicroBoost, which is our humic product, into my water in the beginning of the day. This is my second or third glass of water, so you can see there's just a little leftover. But the fulvic is really the best remineralizer for water. You could put it in your alkaline water. The thing is, if it's, natural spring water already has a lot of minerals, but the fulvic has all of the minerals, So if you want to look at your alkaline water, is it water that they alkalized, or is it just natural alkaline water?
No, it's through the Echo machine, or I'm not doing a product dump, but where it makes it alkaline.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I get it. So the thing about humic and fulvic is and one of the reasons I never call our products humic and fulvic acid, and you'll hear that term a lot, humic and fulvic acids. So humic and fulvic acids are humic and fulvic that have been extracted using hydrochloric acid. Not a bad thing. You have hydrochloric acid in your stomach, but it's just that they taste terrible. So they use them a lot in agriculture and all sorts of different areas, but colloidal minerals, those are also humic and fulvic acid. Okay.
So is the pH neutral?
No, it's very alkaline, very high, like 9.8, 10, 9.8.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe even sometimes higher. Mhm.
Okay,
Thank you.
John Sassmore, you've got your hand up. Hi, John.
Hi, John.
Hi,
Hi.
hi. My question is about some of the minerals in the natural sources that we might not want,
Mhm.
like arsenic and aluminum. Do you
Great.
have any information about whether we end up with more or less of those minerals in our body after ingesting the humic and fulvic?
Yeah, thank you so much. That is just a very, very important subject. And recently, someone posted something about our products saying, that they are going to create heavy metal toxicity in people. So I want to provide a little context, okay? And arsenic is a great example. Thank you for bringing that one up. I've been studying heavy metals for many years, and one of the reasons I wanted to study them is because if you look at the certificate of analysis of our products, you will see heavy metals listed. Now, the amounts of the heavy metals in the products are like magnitudes, thousands of times smaller than you will get in any leafy green vegetable or root vegetable or most vegetables that you eat. Okay. However, because we don't really understand heavy metals, I wanted to really grasp what the issue is. So arsenic is a good example. There are two types of arsenic. There is organic arsenic, and that is bound with a carbon molecule, not toxic at all. Okay, unless you had a huge amount of it, which would be very hard to get. But non-organic arsenic, which comes from manufacturing and all sorts of different mining practices, very, very toxic. You definitely don't want to come into contact with that. The arsenic that will show up on the certificate of analysis won't tell you whether it's organic or non-organic, but it is organic, you see, because it came from 10 to 12 feet below the earth in an area of the earth that has had absolutely almost no human contact anywhere nearby. And it's been below the earth, hasn't even had any contact with modern pollutants, just in the air or the water or the rain that comes down. So that's the first piece. The second, and this is true of most of the heavy metals that you will see in the certificate of analysis in our products. But here's the most important thing. And I've talked with really the world-renowned experts about this because I wanted to know, am I taking a product that's going to cause heavy metal toxicity in me? Because it helped me so much, I want to take it for the rest of my life. And what they explained to me, and they're like chemists and biochemists, is the heavy metals that are associated with the humic and fulvic molecules, they have no valence. What that means is they have no ability to come free from the molecule. In fact, they act like magnets for other heavy metals in your system. And I've got, if anyone is interested in this call, I'm happy to provide the scientific studies about humic and fulvic that explain how useful they are in lowering lead toxicity and other heavy metals that have been studied. So the thing that we don't understand about heavy metals is that heavy metals are a problem in your system when they roam free. When they're just floating around in your system, you get, let's say, some mercury from an old filling is floating around your system. It creates oxidative stress, free radical damage, and that's a problem. But the molecules, the heavy metals that are associated with that humic molecule, they don't create oxidative stress in the body. In fact, that humic molecule gathers those heavy metals and carries them out of your body. A few years ago, we were contacted by a scientist she's Chinese. She started out in China doing heavy metal toxicity. They have huge problems with that because they've got so much pollutants. And then she came to the US and because she wanted a larger venue, and she said, I am so excited because your MicroBoost product is the first product I've used in 10 years, which has lowered toxicity in my patients who have lead and mercury toxicity. So that's anecdotal information. We haven't done a study on our particular product, but I do have lots of data, and I'm happy to share the information about the ways that humic and fulvic both work in lowering heavy metal toxicity in the body, even though the certificate of analysis will show you that there is heavy metals in there. Okay. This is a really big conversation. In fact, just this morning, I wrote a message to this scientist that I was telling you about. And I said, this heavy metals conversation is heating up, and we need to now actively start educating people about heavy metals, because lots of people are talking about them, but we need to understand what they are, because, you know, just arsenic is a good example. You know, inorganic heavy metals are problematic when they're free roaming in your body.
Well, I think I heard on another conversation you had in a podcast I was listening to, where you were talking about, and I think it was the humic, how it was picking up the heavy metals, and you know, lead and mercury are notoriously difficult to get rid of, you know, without some pretty rigorous chelation therapies that have their own bad side effects. So that was a great question, though, John.
And you did mention aluminum, though. Let me talk about aluminum. So aluminum's interesting because, you know, it is the most prevalent mineral on Earth, just so you're clear. So there's so much aluminum everywhere, and there's aluminum in our products as well. One of the challenges with aluminum, and the reason we've had such a problem with aluminum, is because of glyphosate toxicity, because glyphosate causes aluminum to be stored in your pituitary, and then it affects melatonin production, etc. So because humic is so effective at removing glyphosate from your system, and I also have lots of incredible studies that talk about the lowering of glyphosate toxicity in farm animals that they've done major testing on. So it is the go-to thing for lowering glyphosate toxicity. And if you lower your glyphosate exposure and toxicity, then you're also affecting the way that aluminum works in your body. Okay.
So I'll just add in, related to aluminum, that Lactobacillus plantarum and our plantarum that's in our probiotic, it does a very nice job of removing aluminum. But it's interesting because I just watched it was a clip from an interview with the guy from Global Healing, who was measuring. He sent off sweat samples before, so like when the skies were clear and there were no trails in the sky, and when he was doing his sauna, and then on a day when there were trails in the sky, he did the sweat sample, and he showed the difference between the two sweat samples and this huge amount of aluminum that was in his sweat that his body was detoxifying. So anyway, I found that's kind of a sidebar, but very interesting in terms of aluminum. And then it's interesting, the comment you made about glyphosate and aluminum, because there's a agricultural scientist from Australia who was in my last root cause tutorial group, and he was saying that they use aluminum salts, I think, to address glyphosate. So it somehow displaces glyphosate, and I haven't had enough time to really look into that, but he was saying,
are you talking about in agriculture?
Yeah, in agriculture.
Yeah. Well, it is slightly different, and we get into a deep chemical conversation at that level. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if we should go there. It's
Yeah,
going to
we
be
maybe don't.
really.
Maybe we don't need to go there. But it's a question I had to follow up with him. Is like, okay, so if that's part of what's getting sprayed, is that part of what they're trying to address? But they're causing this other I mean, you just never know. And that's probably not a topic I should be discussing on here because I get myself.
Well, and again, another reason why, if you try to work with an ecosystem, our soil is an ecosystem with non-ecosystem kinds of concentrations and tools, it doesn't work over time. So,
well, so that goes back again to, the out of balance minerals, because in the farming system, they use NPK, nitrogen,
exactly,
potassium, and phosphate. And, there's a lot more minerals that a plant needs than those three. And so you're throwing those out of balance. You're throwing the microbiome of the soil out of balance. That's throwing the plants out of balance. That's throwing us. I mean, it's just this whole cascade because everything is connected.
So there's a study, a Science Direct study that was done in 2002, I think. And they measured food grown in 1950 with food grown in 2000. 1999, and they found a significant decline in protein, mineral content, of course, but a rise in carbohydrate content. Because when you do this NPK thing, what happens is the plant grows with more carbohydrate, but less nutritional value. So we have a bigger strawberry that has way less nutritional value than that small little strawberry we used to have in 1950, as an example.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And then the carbohydrates hit the system with more sugar, on and on. So we're part of the Earth's ecosystem. And because our Earth is out of balance, we're out of balance. So where I'm working is I just want to remineralize humanity. So maybe we'll start getting back into balance with our Earth, and we'll start changing things from the inside out.
Well, I also put some of this on my plants.
Yeah.
And I have this little peace lily, and I have an orchid, and I put it on those two things. And the new growth that came out of them was just amazing.
It's actually really fun to do. And if you're going to do it, I definitely recommend mixing it with water. Use our Microbes, put it on you can also use fulvic if you want, but you put it, our Microbes product does have some fulvic in it. And just for people who might not understand why, it actually has to do with the ionization of the humic, because humic, this is one of the other funny things about humic and fulvic, is that humic stays in suspension in that ionic solution. You'll never have to shake the bottle, but only in a certain pH range. Now, the interesting thing is, remember, fulvic can change its polarity, and it actually it constantly changes, and it keeps the pH in a certain level. If we just put fulvic in there, it'll fall out of suspension. But we mix it with fulvic. If we just put humic in there, it'll fall out of suspension over time. But if we put fulvic in there, it will stay, because the fulvic keeps that local system in a certain pH range.
Balance. That's really interesting.
Which is, again, interesting when you think about systems, water systems, soil systems, out in nature, it's clearly a technology. Yeah.
John, did you have another question, or your hand's still up? So I just want to make sure we got all your questions.
You got everything. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I hope I answered it well for you.
Yeah, that's helpful information. I've seen hair tests with high aluminum of people taking Shilajit. So I wondered about that, but maybe it's being detoxed. I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the things you also should recognize with a hair tissue mineral analysis test, and maybe we should do a little talking about different testing for minerals. I think it's useful. So the only test that I actually recommend is something called the Oligoscan. And the Oligoscan, you have to be present with the practitioner, and it uses something called spectrophotometry, which shines a light. It's used, this technology is used in all material sciences, very stable science. It shines a light into 4 places on your palm, and it returns data, which goes through an algorithm, and it delivers the mineral levels inside your cells, intercellular mineral levels. And that's what you really want to know. The thing about hair, it's the next best, but it's still what we call an excretion model. So it depends on what you excrete and what you don't excrete. This is the same if you're using blood. Now, well, not blood, if you're using urine tests for mineral analysis. It's not a great thing because it only tells you what that person has excreted. Now, if you're using blood tests, that only tells you what a person has ingested and is ambient in their system, maybe 72 hours over what they've put in their body over the last 72 hours. So what you want to know, because remember, minerals have to get into they have to be utilized by your mitochondria, and your mitochondria are inside your cells, and your tissues are your cells. So what you really want to know is, how is my body doing in terms of uptaking minerals for the beneficial minerals and electrolytes, and how is it doing in terms of toxic load over my lifetime? What are the stored heavy metals that are in my body that I want to get out? And the best way to do that is with an Oligoscan. And I can provide that info to Martha. I think you might have it, Martha, but
Yeah, that would be great.
yeah, and you can go to their website and find a practitioner in your area. The nice thing is you get the data immediately. You don't have to wait. It's not like it comes back to you, and you'll also have it so you can take it to if you're working with specific practitioners, you can say, hey, I know practitioners who can look at a mineral analysis of somebody that shows an Oligoscan and tell them if they've got parasites or they have, microflora imbalances, or, like candida or something. They can tell all sorts of things about someone's health history or what kind of health issues are beyond just, you're toxic and some heavy metal.
So that's interesting also, because as we're working on this Parkinson's hypothesis related to the gut and mineral, like all kinds of, but a number of the gut bacteria that produce this enzyme called urease that attacks the good bacteria, they run off of nickel.
Interesting. So, yeah, go on.
Well, so one of the things we're looking at, there's a very high rate of Parkinson's in Egypt, where they eat like a paste made of these legumes that are very high in nickel.
That's so interesting. And one of the things we have to think about with heavy metals that's really interesting is that one of the reasons heavy metals can be so problematic in your system is they take up receptor sites for beneficial minerals. So there's certain heavy metals that have these relationships. So you have a particular receptor site for a beneficial mineral, but it's taken up with the heavy metal. And so now you become deficient in that beneficial mineral, and you're storing these heavy metals. So now you have to look at nickel. And this, Martha, I'd love to connect you with the woman who I know who's so educated in this particular thing of looking at the relationships between minerals. If someone's high in zinc, they might be low in something else, and she'll go, oh, see this high zinc, that's why you're low here. She just knows that. And that has not been that's not my mission, but I know the people.
Yeah, I would love that, because this nickel thing is pretty interesting.
We've got to connect you. That would be amazing. Yeah. Thank you, John. Great question.
Looks like we have one more question from Charlie, who
Hello.
works with us.
I'm going to pivot into the pet realm here. Martha recommended that I start giving your pet product to my older dog that has undefined nasal cancer that involves blood loss, and it's doing a really great job of, helping her maintain her blood levels. I greatly appreciate your product for that. But I do have a question, like, on the dosing of the electrolyte version, it's a dose in their water that they're drinking.
Yeah.
And I have a multiple pet household. So, it's a dose by weight, and they drink from a shared bowl of water that they go through, basically a whole bowl of water a day.
Yeah.
So am I, essentially doubling the dosage there so that, each of them are getting a full dose, or, what's the best recommendation there? And then that kind of pivots into the same question for humans. Like, is it possible to take too much as a human, or are we, as a society, so mineral depleted that that's not a concern?
Yeah. So we're all steeped in this concept of dosage. And I never use that word with plant-based minerals because these are ecosystem tools. Dosage is related to concentrated medicines. So the beautiful thing again is that because these are, or they're, formulated in these natural ratios, you can take a lot depending on your needs. So putting it in your your many pets bowl, they all drink from the same bowl. It's just like me putting the electrolytes in this water, and now every time I drink, I'm drinking mineralized water. Isn't that so much better? Because empty water does really nothing for you. Water is a carrier molecule for minerals. Nowhere in nature ever have we has any anybody drunk mineral depleted water. So that's all you need to do. You don't need to worry, especially, you don't have to worry about them getting too much. I wouldn't worry about it at all. And, just, if you go on the back of the container, I believe there's a QR code that should take you to an area where you can get like some charts that tell you by weight how much to use.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah, and that same for everybody else. If you want to try the products, on the back there's a QR code, takes you all to the detailed usage. If anybody does want to try our products, I do want to mention, I think, Martha, you might have a coupon code that is like a 20% off that people could use.
Yes.
And we always recommend using our advanced set, which includes the electrolytes and microboost for humans. For the pets, we have these little sets for the pets as well, for cats and dogs. If you had another kind of pet, you could probably use the cats or dogs and just, go by weight. For hamster, you probably don't need much. Just so you know, we had somebody, we have a zoologist in England. She went to the zoo and she gave every single animal, reptile in the entire zoo. She put down water with just plain water, and she put water with our minerals in it. Every single one drank all of the water with the minerals and then drank the other water.
Animals are so much smarter than we are.
Yeah, they all knew. So I do want to mention, for people who are sensitive, and sensitive means maybe you have autoimmune like me, you have had Lyme's disease, you have had mold exposure, you've had long COVID, so your system either does histamine response very easily, or it does Herx, what are called, detox responses very easily. You just want to start low and slow. And I'll type in the name of the test. But all you want to do is start low and slow. And that means for people who are very sensitive, in this glass of water, you might start with maybe not the full glass, but a 1/4 teaspoon of Microboost. The electrolytes, our fulvic product, no problem. You can just drink it. Don't worry about it at all. Nobody ever has any negative responses to that. But the humic, because it's doing that detox, your body basically, if you're not ready and you have a very sensitive system, your body will go, yeah, woohoo, I can get rid of all this stuff and I'm going to do it all now. And it will give you a rash, or it will give you some other kind of detox symptom. So just start low and slow. Again, because your body's an ecosystem and it likes small incremental changes over time. I actually recommend doing low and slow with any new supplement that you're going to try.
We recommend that too, because the sugar shift in our clinical trial, one of the things that it increased was detoxification enzymes, but we also have sensitive people that, you know, they can't take one capsule a day, much less two. They have to start by opening a capsule and just taking part of it. And
That's me. That's me.
Yeah.
Any probiotic ever, I take this. I literally take maybe a quarter of it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a great reminder also. So, okay, I don't see any more questions. A few of our typical, oh, Carrie's got another question. Wondering why
Can I ask a
Karen's
question?
not asking a question.
Okay,
Oh,
I just have to do this because Martha and I were texting yesterday and she said, you got to try Beam. And I said, oh, I just listened to Luke's story and Caroline's
Oh, great.
podcast. And I do have Parkinson's. So I'm, you know, I listen to everything Martha says, but my package came today. So I'm unpacking it while you're talking. I'm like, oh my
Yay.
goodness, this is like the best little advertisement. So anyway, I've got my package. I'll let you know.
Oh, I'm so happy. And what are the small sprays that you got there?
I
Did
got
you-
the Boo Boo Light and
Yeah.
the Rest of the Light.
So the Boo Boo Lights is amazing for any bug bites, burns, bee stings, completely removes the pain of those kinds of things, or hives, any kind of skin thing, just like boom. And the Happy Lights is incredible if you have any anxiety or any kind of panic, kind of, you know, any anxiety that comes up. So when you have an emotional experience in your body, that is a set of neurotransmitters that are flooding through your body. And if you want to shift that flood of neurotransmitters, Happy Lights is amazing because it uses bergamot. And for most people, when they smell bergamot, it hits the lower brainstem and triggers the release of endorphins. So literally 5 to 7 seconds, if you're feeling anxious, you spray it, you breathe it in, and 5 to 7 seconds, you'll go, wow, I feel better. It's like and once you start doing it, I use it all the time. I use it. I don't have it on my desk right at the moment, but I usually do.
Well, I'm sure I've got one here to show you. Thank you.
All right.
I
Good luck,
think
Jerry.
there's a number 40 that starts with 407. It sounded like maybe you had a question. I don't have your name on here, but if you want to introduce yourself and ask your question. No? Okay.
Oh, here we go. Irene.
We have Irene.
Hi, how are you all?
Great.
Jerry. I just wanted to ask you, I have a grandson who we think he's high functioning autistic. He's very intelligent, but he has problems with his sleep, and that's really the big issue. And I started recently, about a week ago, we started giving him a little bit of the oh my gosh, I forget what it's called, the one with the fumic and fulvic.
So the microboost.
That's it, the microboost. So I started giving him, I don't know if it's too much. He seems to be okay on it, but like a quarter of a capsule. And they haven't been giving it to him with water necessarily. It's just like kind of, you know, drinks it. It's his little chocolate water. He's 2 years old.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, have you seen any studies? Are there any studies on autism and minerals, nutrition, and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I'll tell you, we were approached a few years ago by a group in Salt Lake City, and they work with autistic populations of kids and families that are struggling with kids with autism. And there are varying, you know, ranges of neurodiversity in terms of very low functioning to very high functioning. And they said, we want to do a test. And they had 2 6-year-old twins coming into their program. And most of the things they do are, you know, they do different cognitive stuff and play and things that, like with the kids. They don't do much supplementation, but they brought these 2 twins in. The lower functioning twin could not say any words. She had lots of outbursts, struggled with communication. She didn't hold her bowels. And the higher functioning twin was able to say a few words, she had fewer outbursts and she could hold her bowels. And they said, okay, we're going to bring them in. We're going to take them through our normal protocol and we're going to give them the minerals to the lower functioning twin and not the higher functioning twin. In 2 weeks, and we have a story about it on our website, but the lower functioning twin outpaced the higher functioning twin in terms of communication and numbers of outbursts. And they were like, at that point, they were like, okay, this is just part of our protocol.
Amazing. In 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yes, 2 weeks. So the thing, of course, there's so many correlations with, glyphosate and mineral deficiency is a huge part of neurodiversity, huge part. And I'm not, I'm a believer that neurodiversity is not an illness. I mean, I recognize that there are people who really struggle when they're on the lower functioning realm, but neurodiversity is a different brain and a different nervous system, and supporting that difference with the full spectrum of minerals can allow that person to find their own way with their neurodiversity, so that they can find a way that can work with them, where they can interface with the world in a more effective way.
I like that way of thinking.
Yeah. We have, just so you know, I have my granddaughter, who is neurodiverse. She's high functioning autistic, just graduated from high school 2 days ago. So, yeah, she takes the minerals every day.
I mean, I think it's a really underappreciated across the spectrum of not only autism, but all of the chronic conditions we are dealing with. Is, we have lost our internal ecosystem of the microbiome.
Yes.
And that's a huge issue. And we have lost the nutrient density of our food. And glyphosate has bound up the minerals that are there. And so between these two things, if we can restore these two foundational pieces of our health, I think we can go a long way to helping people get back to a state of being happier and healthier and more energy and better sleep and all of these things. And so with that, I think we will bring it to a close. We don't have any more questions and we're right on time, which is unusual for this group.
I do just want to say I love you, Martha.
Thank you.
I'm in awe of you, and I so appreciate you having me on to join your community, and thanks for all the great questions.
Well, thank you for coming. And we have a question. Okay.
Can you?
We can hear you, I think.
Okay. Well, this is a pet question again. If you have cats and dogs and the water bowl, I noticed that the cat formula is slightly lower in one of the ingredients. So can they share the bowl?
Well, let me explain. We have two products for both cats and dogs. The mineral product for both the cats and dogs is not recommended to put in the water. You put it on their food. They will eat all their food. They won't drink all the water. You want them to get all the minerals, the complete mineral for cats or complete mineral for dogs. You put that on the food. That's why there's a dropper. The electrolyte one, that you can put in the water.
That you can put in the water. So which one
Those
would
are
I?
The electrolyte. The electrolyte one is the same for cats and dogs. It's actually exactly the same.
Oh, it is the same. I got you. Okay.
We
And
just
then
go on.
the other question is taking it with Martha's product. Do you just have to space it an hour apart, or?
So with the when we say taking the probiotics an hour apart from another probiotic, that's because the probiotic is designed as a working system of organisms that are live, but you know, you can, I actually take the Beam minerals with my probiotics because it's kind of feeding the probiotics the same way it's feeding me. So you wouldn't need to separate the Beam minerals from the probiotics.
There are many people that consider humic and fulvic to be prebiotics, meaning they create a beneficial environment for those beneficial bacteria. So and microbes and whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay. And then is there a discount code, or do we order it on Martha's site, or how do we order this?
So there is a discount code if you go to the Beam, website, and when you check out, you can use the discount code, all capital letters, Sugar Shift. And that will
Sugar
get
Shift.
You, yeah, and that will get you 20% off. And if you want to buy our products right now, we're also having a cross promotion for Beam. And so if you go to our website, you can put in Beam, BEAM, and that will get you 20% off our products.
I see. So we off of Beam and your product.
Right, but you have to go to Beam's website to get their product and use our code, and our website to get our product and use their code. So it's
all right. Okay. If we're using the electrolyte in the water, what do you think about distilled water?
Mm-hmm.
Or a lot of people are drinking bottled water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So can we put it, like my husband goes to work or whatever, can we put it in this bottled water in all of the bottled water, or is it a certain dose per day?
What I'm going to tell you is every time I fill up my glass with water, I put a splash of electrolytes in it every time. Don't worry.
I'll just put it in the bottled water, each bottle water there.
Yep.
Okay.
That's great. That's great.
Okay. Any other feedback that you want information you want to give us on the pet products at all?
Well, I'm just going to tell you, your pets need minerals more than anybody for two reasons. One, because unless you're making their food at home from real food, if you're using pet food that you buy in the store, it does not have the nutrients that they need, the full spectrum of minerals and nutrients that you need. Secondly, what was the other thing I was going to tell you? Oh, they are
probably has a lot of glyphosate in it.
Well, and that's exactly because if you're using it that you're buying from the store, it has glyphosate. But plus, if they're outdoor pets, they are encountering their noses are right down where all the glyphosate is. So you really, it is the best thing you can do for your pets. And I've heard story after story of people who, whose aging pet dog particularly was, lying around doing nothing, and suddenly they gave him the minerals and the dog was jumping around like a puppy again, and they were like, whoa, what the heck happened?
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
I know you're gonna do a program, Martha, on the glyphosate, but I was talking to a lawn person, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they said that it's not as heavy on the lawn that they're treating like they did years ago. And some of them are like natural products, like essential oil, things like that.
It depends on who you go to, who's using who. And I'm particularly if you're in urban settings where there's landscapers doing, offices and all those kinds, they're all using glyphosate.
They are, because they all have to, by law, use the same stuff. That it's very regulated, and you have to be certified to spray all that stuff. So it is still very bad.
Yeah, it's still very bad. I'm sorry to say.
So
it was interesting. Oh, go ahead.
What do I ask them? I'm going to ask them what they're spraying, like the chemical compound on what they're spraying.
Yeah, and then ask them to tell you the exact product, and then look into it. Yeah, and there are natural lawn care products. There are people who are doing natural lawn care, but if your lawn is really perfect and green, it's probably
right.
not. So, sorry to say.
Okay.
Yeah, it was interesting during COVID. we would go out and walk every morning very early around this park that was near our house. And because we were going so early, we saw the parks and recreation people there like spraying. And this is the other thing that parents don't realize, or grandparents, is that all around the children's play equipment, when you go to these parks and you see there's no weeds around the gym equipment and everything, they come at like 7 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning and they spray all around these things. But then the kids come and play later in the day and their hands are in the rocks and all of that. And it's just another, the glyphosate is really one of my big pet peeves. So I'm glad to have another tool against glyphosate, because we can't do enough to help remediate ourselves of this problem that we have.
And some cities are actually outlawing, Parks and Rec are no longer using it. In Grand Junction, actually, just in the last 6 months, they are no longer using that on any of the parks. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but that's what we're told.
Yeah, there's a woman, her name's Kathleen. Now, I forget her last name now, but she was from Orange County, and she started a kind of a movement to get people to get off of all of that.
Glyphosate lady. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your all listening and your interest. I am, if you know anyone who wants to learn, any other communities that are interested in learning more about minerals and how they work, please turn them on to me. Thank you so much, Martha. I swear our partnership is is golden.
Well, I so appreciate it. And we're really looking forward. In 2 weeks, we'll have Amber with us, and maybe just tell them a little bit about Amber before we hop off. And
oh my gosh. So Amber is our clinical director, but she comes with this incredible depth and breadth of knowledge. She's also a farmer, a regenerative farmer. She has a farm up in Montana. And she left Brooklyn during COVID, the beginning of COVID, and went to Montana and has been doing regen farming, basically taking a piece of land that had been destroyed from conventional farming and is bringing it back to life. And so her knowledge base about humic and fulvic is actually in many ways deeper and broader than mine. She's also an Ayurvedic practitioner and a nutritionist. So she's got the letters after her name with those two things. So she brings a lot of, her ability to talk on something and bring much more depth and breadth. I'm very focused. I'm like the mineral lady, she's got much more depth and breadth. I'm sure the conversation you guys are going to have is amazing. It's going to be amazing.
We're excited for that too. And, just appreciate you guys, and really appreciate you coming on here and your journey. And just thank you so much. And I will hear
how things go with this.
So we can send you some clips or whatever you want to be able to use from that too.
Okay. Let me know how it goes with your Parkinson's people.
Great. I will follow up on that actually, because we want to try to do a little mini self-study. So
let's do it. All right.
Figure that out. Okay, great. Thanks so much, Carolyn.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Charlie, and I forgot your other team member, but thank you guys for supporting. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.